Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video we are going to be reassembling our Bolens tube frame PTO with all the shiny new parts we have here on the bench. In the last video, we made up this nylon seal washer on the lathe. And last video you couldn't really see it the best because of its colour, but on this blue workshop towel, hopefully you can see it a bit better. And this is the original for reference. So I think we did a pretty good job with that. But then the other parts we've got here, I will run through too. The big bearing is for the front end of the PTO, which is this end. Then we've got an oil seal and a new needle bearing for the other end of the PTO. Then we've got some of these new circlips, which would normally be a really easy part to get our hands on. However, because of the thickness of these old circlips, which is bigger than normal, it took us quite a while to try and find some, and we only found one shop in the UK that actually sells them, so we bought enough to do 25 of these PTO rebuilds, so we've got enough to last us for quite a while. We did also order a new one of these internal snap rings or circlips as well, however it hasn't arrived in time for this video. We did actually look over the old one though, and we think this is in pretty good condition. So for this one, we're going to use this circlip again, and we're going to use the other ones that we've ordered on our future rebuilds, and we ordered enough of these to match the amount of these circlips that we ordered. So again, we can do another 25 PTOs if we need to. And obviously we've got a new grease nipple there as well. And with all of that, that should be all of the parts we need to start reassembling this PTO. We have both of the main components laid out the way they will go here, because on this end you have the circlip, then the pulley would go on there, then another circlip, then the drive to what would be the rear attachments, and then on the other end you've got the two circlips either side of the big bearing, and then the drive at the front of the PTO, which is this side, so kind of away from the camera. But we've kind of worked out what order we're going to put everything on in. Now, because this bearing here has a circlip either side of it, we're going to leave that bearing till later. And the first thing we're going to put on is this needle bearing, which needs to get pushed in there. And we have actually checked on the outside of the bearings that they are an interference fit with the PTO. Because obviously when the previous bearings disintegrated, the shaft would have been flying all over the place, and we wanted to make sure that that didn't oval the shaft too badly. And they are still an interference fit, so that is all good. Now, the plan is to put the needle bearing in this end, then put the first circlip down here, behind where the big bearing will go, and then slide the shaft through. Once we've got the shaft through, we can then put on the oil seal. Now, we could put the oil seal on with the needle bearing. However, we think if we do that, when we put the shaft through, there's a high chance that we'll just push the oil seal out. So to combat this, or so that we can put it on properly when the shaft is on, we've got some of this bar, which originally looked like that, but we've just taken down in the lathe to look like this, with a flat face and a 3/4 diameter hole in there. Meaning that once this shaft is in there, we can use this to actually push the oil seal on there, and that fits quite nicely on there too, so that should work quite well as a kind of pushing bar. Then once that is on, we can probably put that circlip on that end, and then we'll move to the other side, putting on the big bearing, the other two circlips on here, and then the seal washer. We have the press set up here, and we've gone through our old press tools and found the one that fits quite nicely with the needle bearing here. So I'll just plop that on there. We do have to be careful with how far we press this in, because we need to go down enough to leave enough space for the oil seal. However, we don't want to go too far in. So we'll have to be watching that and making sure we do it slowly. We now have the needle bearing in fully, and we cut where we did because we had to make quite a few precise adjustments to where that is, and we used the digital calipers to get that in exactly the right amount. And the challenge with that is the fact that we had to account for this wear on the end of the PTO casting. However, we kind of went from the lowest point and measured from there, and we think we've got that right now. So the next thing to do is put one of our circlips on the shaft here. We've already oiled up that end, so that should be able to slide quite nicely into that bearing. Now these are new, so this might be slightly difficult to open up, especially with how thick they are too. Here we are. Getting there. Just need to get it over that slot. Cut there because I was having a few issues with that circlip. However, we should be able to now just gently insert this. It's also worth mentioning that we did the good practice thing of checking that the needle's still turned once we'd pressed the bushing in, which I forgot to mention previously. However, that should be pretty much where the shaft goes. Obviously that moves about at the moment. It won't once we have the other bearing in, but now we should be ready to put that oil seal on that end. Slight change of plans now. Instead of putting the oil seal on next, we're going to put the big bearing on the other end of the PTO in there. Idea being, at the moment, it does move around a tiny bit, and we don't want to risk damaging the oil seal, which could possibly happen if that moves about a bit when we're fixing the big bearing in. So that will go first, and as you can see, we've taken the oil seal off one side of the bearing, we've left the other one on. The idea behind that being that we will push this on with the open side facing inwards, so when we grease the PTO, the grease goes into the bearing too, and then gets lubricated at the same time rather than just being completely sealed. And then it's still got the seal on the other side so that grease doesn't leak out the other end. But what we will do now is set the PTO up again in the press and get ready to press in this bearing. We have it all set up in the press now, and the 30mm socket is perfect for pushing down on the outer race of the bearing without being too large that we can't push it into the casting past the edge. But I will now slowly press this in. It should hit a kind of buffer in a second, which it has now. There we are. So I will let this up. Take that out, and you can see the bearing properly pushed in now. Yet another change to our plan now, and we're going to put the big internal snap ring on now before we push the shaft all the way through, just to make sure the bearing is held in the right place. And using these right angled circlip pliers means that you can actually see what's going on here. And I will just put that there and use flat blade screwdriver to try and push this down fully into the slot. And there we go, that is from what I can see, all of it is just clipped into the slot nicely, which means in theory we can bring this up to there. The snap ring has hit on the other side, and we can see now that that won't go any higher, so that is good. The next thing to go on this side would be the nylon washer, and then another circlip. But obviously we've got to decide whether we want to do that or the oil seal on the other side first. We've decided to put on the nylon seal washer first. So what we will do is probably just slot this on the end, and looking at this you can see why you had to have that kind of step on the back because of the internal circlip. But we will push this onto here, and then we need to find something to put under this to hold at the right height so that we can then put the snap ring on. So we will find something to put under there and come back to you in just a second. We have the PTO set up on the blocks now, and a couple of bits of metal underneath to hold the shaft pretty much where we want it to be. And as you can see, we've pushed our nylon seal washer in there and it fits perfectly. You would have almost thought that someone made that specifically, but I think that confirms that we did an all right job on that. Now it's time to put the circlip on, which gives me another chance to try to redeem myself from earlier. This is probably one of the things that I struggle with when it comes to tractor projects, is doing these circlips, especially these really thick, tight ones that we have on this PTO. Have been a complete nightmare. They have appear to be somewhat stuck here. However, I'm sure I can get it to move. I have to use a screwdriver to kind of help me here. There we are. It's almost in the groove there, and if I just kind of work my way around with this, hopefully I can push that in. Might have to have the pliers on there to open it up as I push it in. We have that circlip on now. Finally, that took a bit of wiggling about, but it's on there now, and I'm happy with how that is on. Now, if we look at this side, we're going to be finally moving on to the oil seal that goes on the outside of that needle bearing. So we have a method that we think will work quite well for putting that on, but we're just going to quickly gather the stuff that we will need for it and come back to you in just a second. So here is our plan then. We have this old kind of rubber glove that we've cut the ring finger off of, and that finger of that glove is now on the shaft here, and because it is a splined shaft, we did try and clean it up the best as possible, but to avoid the seal getting damaged by any rough bits, we wanted to put this on there, and it should make it kind of slide on smoother. Also, to help with that, we've put some hydraulic oil on the glove finger so that it hopefully just slides nice and easily. But we'll use our pushing tool now to kind of push this further down. That does actually seem quite tight on there. We actually struggled with our pushing device because we deliberately made that a tight fit to the shaft. However, by the looks of it, the glove was enough to kind of make this stick, and this just completely, due to friction and the thickness of the glove, it just wouldn't move anymore. So I'm going to try this kind of semi-open-ended spanner and see if I can use this to push this down evenly, which is working quite well actually. Till about now, the glove might be starting to get in the way slightly. And then from now onwards, we'll probably just try and push it down by hand, see if I can get some of that glove out, and then probably use the pushing tool just to push it, the final bit into place. We have the oil seal on now, and the pusher worked for the final bit of that, and we managed to get the glove off without any bits sticking in there. Now the next thing to do is put the first circlip on for the pulley that goes on this shaft. Now, see if I can get one of these circlips first try for the first time in this project. Just a tiny bit more. The front's in but not the back. Have to be quite gentle with that. I think it is just the back is not quite in. There we are. That is on now. And the next thing would be to put the pulley on. However, something quite critical is that we slide the belt guard over first, because when the pulley's on, you can't get that belt guard kind of over it without having to bend it or possibly damage it in any way. And we know that has to go on first because this isn't the first take of this clip. We already had this on and then realised that the belt guard had to go on too. But now we have that the right way around. I will put this on there and make sure I have a block underneath there. And this did already actually just drop down quite a bit on there. Which needs tapping down using a socket and the hide hammer so that it's sitting on the circlip. There we are. And we can see the circlip groove where the next one needs to go on, which is what I will do now. There we are, that just needs pushing down a tiny bit further. That's very nearly in. Just go around and push it in on all sides. I think the pulley might need tapping down. Did see the circlip close up a bit there. Just want to make sure that that is fully on, which I think it is now. I will just use this to make sure that is as far down as it will go. Yep, I think that circlip is on now finally, which means the pulley is mounted too. That is all good. And now this belt guard, actually no, that belt guard probably doesn't want to be bolted on yet, so that we can get the belts on when it comes to fitting this to a tractor. Next thing to do now is probably put the new grease point on. Final thing now is the grease nipple, which I will just start this off, or do most of this by hand. And just snug it up with a spanner. That will do. And now this has given us an opportunity to use a new kind of attachment for our grease gun that we got, which is this kind of quick release or safe lock, as Mato calls it, which goes on the end here, which should make it easier to kind of lock onto and unlock from grease points. A lot of our kind of YouTube people that we follow in America have these, and they have a different brand of them that we couldn't find over here, so we had to get the genuine Mato one. And if you don't know who Mato are, they are the company that make these great grease guns, which if you haven't seen this before, we did a review on this a while back, so if you haven't watched that, feel free to go have a look at that. There'll be a link to it somewhere. But that now locks onto there, and as Mato advertised with these grease guns, it is a one-handed operation, very, very much helped by the kind of quick release part there. Not sure how much grease this is going to take, so I'll just keep looking at each end to make sure I don't miss tons coming out of it or anything. We cut the video there because we needed to change the cartridge on our grease gun, which is very easy with one of these Mato lube shuttle grease guns. Just quickly unthread it and then thread the new one in without getting covered in grease, unlike a regular grease gun. But now with that greased up, we were doing it very carefully because we didn't want to blow either of the oil seals. But now we can feel how this turns, and it does turn very smoothly, very nicely. And looking at movement on anything, can't feel any wear movement. So that is perfect, as you'd expect with all new components. So I think that is a job well done so far. And the next time you will see this in a video, we will be fitting it to a tractor, which, as anyone that's tried fitting a Bolens tube frame PTO to a tractor that hasn't got one on will know, there are quite a few challenges that will make that more difficult than it sounds when it comes to attaching this around all of the other working aspects of the tractor. But that is it for this video, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.